So, for this lecture, we're going to talk about design thinking. Design thinking is a human centered approach to innovation that integrates the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. Now, this methodology has been pivotal to transforming a lot of industries, including information technology. So, for this lecture, the learning objectives are going to be to define the 5 stages of design thinking and explain their significance in UX design. We're going to look at how we can apply design thinking principles to solve like simple and everyday problems. And then we're going to reflect on how the design thinking process supports user centered design. Now, design thinking is a problem solving framework that prioritizes the end user's needs. Now, unlike traditional linear approaches, it's more iterative, focusing on a continuous brainstorming and adapting to meet the consumer's demands. Now, this process encourages teams to empathize with users, define problems clearly, ideate extensively, prototype solutions, and then test them rigorously. Now, these principles are the fundamental values and mindset that guides the design thinking process. The first one is, user centricity. That means placing the user at the heart of the design process to gain a deep understanding of their needs, their preferences, and their pain points. Then there's collaboration, which is fostering a multidisciplinary approach involving individuals with diverse skills and perspectives in the creative process. There's ideation, which is encouraging the generation of a wide range of ideas and solutions through like brainstorming and the creative thinking. Then there's experimentation, which is embracing a culture of prototyping and testing to iterate and refine ideas, products, and services rather quickly. And then there's the implementation, and that's bringing concepts to life by executing well defined plans and strategies to deliver like real world solutions that it's going to address like the user's needs effectively. So you have to think of design thinking as a philosophy, and it also serves as a tool that helps you solve problems. Being a little bit more creative. So, when trying to solve a problem, the designer needs to focus on the human side, through a human centered design lens. You have to think about their needs. How can you help them solve their problems? And how can, you innovate based on those particular needs? Now, we use design thinking to accomplish these by following a 5 step process that draws on logic, imagination, intuition, and systematic reasoning to explore the possibilities of what could be and to create the desired outcome that benefits the end user. Now, the design process for design thinking consists of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So let's discuss each one of these. So let's first start with the first phase, which is the process of empathizing. Okay, so sometimes this is also referred to as understanding. Now, during this step, we get to know the users and the problems that they face. You should observe and engage with the people that are using your product to, better understand them, on an emotional or psychological level. You should take the time to really know the industry that you're designing for. Only through like proper research, can we really know what the user is thinking. Anything outside of that is an assumption. The tools that we use during this process are group interviews, as is scenario mapping, to document like what the user is currently experiencing, mind mapping, and then empathy mapping, like, what are they feeling or they're doing or they're saying, and we'll discuss these late in one of the later lectures. Now, unfortunately, a lot of designers and developers, they try to minimize this phase and try to just basically kind of assume what the user is thinking, but even though you might be, taking the time to observe them, you still have to remember to ask the user, why they're doing, what they're doing. Now, the next phase is define, and that's also known as sort of like an analyze phase. So it's during this phase of the process that we say define the user's needs and their problems. We should take insight from, say, the empathy phase, and then try to make sense, of what we find. We want to look for patterns and document like pain points. And this is all going to kind of yield for us our problem statement. Now, the tools that we use during this phase are storyboarding, creating personas, and a prioritization matrix. Now, we must be sure that we form a user-centric problem statement and that it focuses on the users and their needs, not on the products, specifications or the business outcomes. And we should also ensure that it's not too broad or not too narrow. Now, the next phase of the design thinking process is ideate. And this is where we generate ideas, for innovative solutions. Now, we should take what we've learned in the earlier phases and then think about different ways that we can solve the problem. Now, remember, no idea is a bad idea. So when you're working in a group, you should create like different ideas and decide on like maybe what's the most workable one. Now, the tools that we use during this phase are brainstorming, sketching, and dot voting. Now, it's important in this phase to think outside of the box and encourage like wild ideas. Now, the next phase is the process of prototyping. Now, as an IT geek, I love this phase because it allows, my ideas to really kind of come to life visually. Now, in the design thinking process, we don't know yet if the solution that we create is going to work. So during this phase, what we do is we turn our ideas into tangible products by creating like a rough model or maybe even a sketch. Now, remember how users respond to our prototype are going to indicate if our design should either be rejected or accepted. Now, the tools that we will use can consist of, either using like pencil and paper, or we could use maybe a more like sophisticated prototype app like Figma or Marvel app, or even like some kind of 3D modeling software. Now, remember, prototyping should be a quick process. So, don't get lost in making it too complicated. Adding too much complexity can interfere with like focusing on what you really need to test in the next phase. Now, in the fifth phase of the process, this is where we test. This is where we test our solution. So you should invite users to test it out and respond to your prototype. Now, their responses will let you know whether you need to either move forward or kill your idea before investing like additional resources into it. Now, during the testing phase, you want to ask if the solution is useful, is it usable, is it desirable, is it effective, and is it efficient? So you want to gather feedback on how the users feel about your idea. Now, during this phase, we need to be sure that we listen to our users. And if they determine it's not a good idea, then we got to be open to change or maybe starting over from scratch if we need to. Now, the tools that we use during this phase, there's a website called usertesting.com, that gives us access to the type of users that we're trying to target for whatever the app or website or whatever it is that we're testing. Or if you have direct access to your users, then they would be, you would utilize them to actually do your testing. Now, the key is that design thinking, again, like I said, it's a philosophy. So it's not a strict recipe, for what we need to do. So we also have to remember that it's a cycle. Okay, so after you test, you might come up with like better ideas or ways to improve your design. So then you might have to iterate through the phases until, of course, you get the best solution. Now, this non-linear iterative process allows teams to, like I said, be able to cycle back through stages as they need. And then it also fosters continuous improvement and innovation. Now, I've provided a handout with an overview of the design thinking in the module. So you should print that out and use that as your guide. Now, design thinking has been instrumental in the IT sector, and it leads to the development of user friendly interfaces, intuitive software, and innovative digital solutions. So, let's explore some of the real world examples. Now, Netflix is a prime example of leveraging design thinking to enhance user experience. In its early days, Netflix relied on DVDs by mail. However, as technology advanced, the company pivoted to a streaming model. So Netflix applied design thinking principles by one, empathizing with users. Through extensive data analysis, they understood users' viewing habits like binge watching, preferences for a certain genre, and the appeal of convenience. They used the principle ideating and prototyping, based on like insights, they introduced like personalized recommendations, powered by machine learning. Prototypes of the recommendation systems were tested, with like subsets of users. And then, of course, testing, continuous user feedback kind of helped refine the system, making it more accurate and responsive. So as a result, Netflix personalized algorithm became the cornerstone of its success, keeping users engaged and driving subscriber growth. Now, Apple revolutionized consumer technology by embedding design thinking into its culture. Like, consider the iPhone. When we talk about empathy, they focused on understanding users' frustration with existing smartphones, such as clunky interfaces and poor usability. As far as ideation and prototyping, they prioritize a sleek design and intuitive interface. And they also tested prototypes of the touchscreen keyboard, which was a major departure from the physical keyboards at the time. And then as far as testing and iteration, they iteratively improved the iPhone based on rigorous internal testing and user feedback. So this approach created not just a phone, but a cultural icon that set the standards for most smartphones. Now, Airbnb struggled initially to gain traction. Its breakthrough came when the founders applied design thinking, to address the platform's trust issues. So, as far as empathy, what they did is they interviewed both the hosts and the guests to understand their fears and their desires. Hosts wanted assurance that their properties wouldn't be damaged, while guests needed to trust the accommodations. They defined the problem so that the problem was the lack of trust was identified as the root issue. So Airbnb introduced professional like photography services for hosts, enhancing the quality of the listing and reassuring guests. They also introduced user reviews to increase transparency. And then as far as testing and refinement, these changes, they were tested in key markets and the overwhelming positive response led to a global rollout. So, by addressing these trust issues that they found, Airbnb was able to transform themselves into like a multi-billion-dollar business. Now, Uber Eats, which is the food delivery platform, they use design thinking to say streamline their app. So, as far as empathy, what they did was they researched, and what that research revealed was that users wanted fast, simple, and reliable food delivery. Drivers needed clear instructions, and restaurants required better order tracking. So they created prototypes of simplified app interfaces for customers and drivers and restaurants. And then, they tested these prototypes, and the feedback allowed Uber Eats to refine the app. For example, introducing like real-time tracking for deliveries improved customers' trust and satisfaction. Now, today, Uber Eats leads the food delivery market because of its user-friendly app and its efficient service. Now, MRI machines can be intimidating, especially for children. So, GE Healthcare, they use design thinking to redesign this whole experience. So, when it came to empathizing, they observed children's anxiety and they identified the need to create a more welcoming environment. So the problem that they defined was how might we make MRI scans less frightening for children? So they brainstormed creative ways to engage children, such as turning the MRI experience into an adventure. And then they prototyped it. They developed like theme environments for like MRI rooms, such as like pirate ships or space missions. And then they tested it. And the feedback from parents and children showed significant decrease in anxiety levels. Now, this human centered design improved the patient's experience and made the MRI scans less daunting and intimidating. Now, all of these case studies illustrate the power of design thinking. We empathize, that is going to drive our solution. Understanding the users, that's going to be foundational for us. Okay, we need to iterate processes to lead to refinement. So, prototype and testing, these are a key to success. And then we need to collaborate because this is going to foster like creativity. Having that multidisciplinary team is going to enhance your innovation. Now, to incorporate design thinking into your IT projects, you want to consider these steps. One is, like I said, empathize with users. You want to conduct user research to understand their needs, their challenges, their pain points, their behaviors. Okay, then you define the problem. You want to analyze the insights that you gathered, to define the problem that you aim to solve. Then you want to ideate solutions. You want to encourage brainstorming sessions to explore like potential solutions, to solve the problem. Then you want to prototype rapidly. You want to develop prototypes to visualize and to test the ideas quickly. And then, of course, the test and iterate. Gather your user feedback on whatever your prototype is that you've tested, and then refine the solution accordingly. Now, by following these steps, we as IT professionals can develop solutions that are not only technologically sound, but they also align with users' needs and business objectives. Okay, so your takeaway for this: design thinking is a powerful approach that fosters innovation and user centered solutions in information technology. Now, by embracing its principles and its processes that we've talked about, we as IT professionals can create products and services that resonate with our users, that are impactful, that are relevant, that are transformative, and that they stand out in the competitive market. Now, there's an article, Design Thinking Examples from the Knowledge Academy. This is what inspired some of the examples that I've talked about and some of the concepts that we've discussed today. It provides like an excellent overview for the real world applications of design thinking across like the various industries. Thank you.